Hello and welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us for this week's episode of Cooking Connected. My name is Sajwa, and I'm here today with my coworker, Jordan. Say hi, Jordan.
Hi, everyone.
All right. And so today we're going to be working together. We're going to be doing a really awesome recipe, but of course, I'm going to let Chef Jordan introduce that. I do want to go through what a normal Cooking Matters class looks like. It's a 6-week nutrition-based cooking class, and it usually features a nutrition educator and a chef, and they work together, they work through a recipe. We learn some cool ways to cook that recipe, some nutrition to go along with it. And then, of course, we eat together in the end. So it's really fun. And again, I just want to mention Cooking Matters is here today in collaboration with the University of Minnesota. So we just want to give a big shout out to that. And before we move forward with our recipe, I do want to ask if you guys would be willing to do our survey for us. I have our survey code today. Make sure that's in you. All right, so our program code for this week's episode of Cooking Connected is going to be E097392. And again, that's our program code for this week's episode of Cooking Connected. So if you have a little spare time after this episode is finished, please go ahead and check the description box and do the survey for us, because those kind of feedback and responses really help us continue this work and continue to do a good job with it. With that being said, I'm going to go ahead and pass the mic to Jordan.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back. As Sadra was saying, I don't know if we mentioned this yet, we are going to be making a white bean basil chicken chili today.
Yes.
So this is a new recipe for me. I've always wanted to try it, but it is a Cooking Matters recipe, and it looks really good. So we're going to give it a try. It's new for me. Sajwa, have you ever tried this one?
No, I haven't tried this one. This one's new for me too, though I have had other white bean chilies, just not the Cooking Matters one. But from reading the recipe, looking at all the herbs and spices we're going to be putting in there, I know this one's going to be just as good. So I really look forward to this. Plus, I love chili. It's like one of my favorite things.
Yeah. All right, everyone. So let's go ahead and get started. So as always, the first thing we do is wash our hands. 20 seconds, make sure we're getting all the surfaces of our hands in between our fingers, on our wrists. You can sing the ABCs or happy birthday twice, just to make sure that we're getting our hands nice and clean. That's really important. The second thing is to wash our countertops. Make sure those are good and sanitized. Food safety is really important, so just making sure that our hands are clean, our countertops are clean, and finally our produce. So today we are working with a few some fresh produce, making sure that we're rinsing our produce and rinsing the tops of our cans as well. That's also something that's really important. So I do have my produce rinsed, my hands are washed, and my countertops are ready to go. So let's go ahead. I'll switch my view so you guys can see what I'm doing here.
All right.
So as you can see, yeah, as per usual, I do have everything out and ready to go. That is called mise en place. As we like to joke, mess is in place. So this is just an easy way to get everything started, especially since this is a new recipe for me. Yeah. I just want to make sure that everything's ready to go.
That's a great point, Jordan.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and get started. The first step actually says to remove any skin and excess fat from the chicken pieces that we're working with and cut the chicken into 1/2-inch cubes. So this step I'm actually going to wait on. We are going to be cutting our produce today, and it's really important when you're working with raw chicken that you keep it separate from your produce. We don't want to worry about something called cross-contamination, getting chicken juice onto our vegetables. We are cooking it all together today, but so it's just still really important to just always keep that in habit. So I'm just going to go ahead and cut my produce first, and then we'll work with the chicken.
Yeah.
So we're going to go ahead and skip to step 2 and come back to step 1 a little later. So step 2 says to rinse, peel, and finely chop our onion, and then we're going to peel and mince our garlic. So we have our medium onion today. Again, proper knife safety. We're going to pinch our blade and wrap our fingers around the handle there. So that's how you should be holding your knife. Again, you should always be practicing this skill. It just gives you more power and a little more safety. It takes a little time to get used to it. So just something to work in with your knife safety. So I'm gonna go ahead and cut the end off here. And then just a little bit of that fuzzy part, because that's the side that's holding our onion together. So we don't want to cut off too much of that. These are awesome scraps for our broth. We did make a video. Yeah.
I hope you guys are saving those scraps for your broth bag, and check out our veggie broth, and we have a chicken broth videos up on YouTube. They're also on our Facebook page, and you'll know what we're always talking about. We're always talking about the broth bag, so check that out.
Yeah, it's just a really great way to save money. Broth can, if you use it a lot, it can really add up. So if you make your own, it honestly tastes way better too. I just made some chicken broth and we just made a soup out of it. It was awesome.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up, especially now as, it is still August, but we are going to be moving towards that fall, winter time when all you want is a good soup or something like that. So keep that in mind as a way to get the most out of your vegetable and chicken scraps.
Absolutely.
Now, could you tell us a little bit about what you're doing with the onion here? I love the way that you cut onions, Jordan. It's like the best.
Yeah, this is a really simple way to cut your onions. So I just had my whole onion here. I cut off both ends, just a little bit of that fuzzy side, and then I chopped it in half to make a flat surface. We don't want it rolling around on us. And then I cut straight down. So I made these little sections, and the onion has these nice little guidelines on it. So you can use that as a guideline and make it as big or as small as you want. And then finally, you just chop straight down. So this is a really fast way to prep your onions. When you get to the end here, it gets a little more difficult to cut. So I always just lay it down on my cutting board, just quickly chop through and try to use as much of that onion as possible. So we come up with this nice little dice.
Yeah.
And you can actually make this a little bit smaller. We are doing a fine chop today on these onions. So I'll show you one extra little tip that might be a little more advanced. So being careful with your knife, of course, when we're doing this. If you want to make this, you notice how I get these large sections of onion, my goodness. You can actually make an extra cut straight down this way.
Oh.
So you just place your palm on top and then you make an extra cut. Now it's really important that you do not cut all the way through the onion because again, this part is holding it together.
Right.
So then you're just going to go ahead and chop it like you normally would. And you can do that a few different times if you really want a smaller dice. But you'll see that I'm getting my sections are a little bit smaller now.
Oh yeah.
So that's a nice little kind of a more advanced tip because you are using your knife and cutting this way. It's a little bit more difficult to maneuver, but.
So yeah, you are going to want to take your time with that one, but that is a really great tip. I actually hadn't seen that before myself, so I'm going to be trying that next time I'm in the kitchen with an onion.
Absolutely. My onions are going everywhere today. Oh my goodness. Okay.
So I see you're just cutting them a little bit smaller, using kind of that mincing technique that we've talked about before, especially when we work with our garlic.
Absolutely. So this is just a rough chop where it doesn't really have to be pretty. I'm just thinking about my soup today, so I really don't want a huge chunk of onion in my soup,
right?
Or my chili. So just making sure that they're a little bit smaller. If you do like onions, you can leave them bigger if you like, but I like onions, but I really don't want just the taste of onions in one bite of chili.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. When it does come to things like, the chops that you're putting into a soup or anything that you're cooking, really, you can modify it according to what you're comfortable with. Maybe you have younger ones who aren't comfortable with eating onion. You could always cut that smaller. Same thing with like other ingredients that we've been using. There's always the option to go smaller or larger according to your taste buds and what you're comfortable eating.
Absolutely. All right, so just quickly clean up my cutting board. It's always really important when you're cutting a lot of vegetables to clean up your cutting board. You don't want to have too many vegetables on your board at one time. It can be kind of difficult to work with. You may hear my dog in the background. He is here
There
today.
he is. How cute.
So, he will be joining us for Cooking Connected today. So next we're going to go ahead and chop our garlic. So I've got 2 cloves of garlic, and what you're going to go ahead and do is with your blade facing away from you, you're just going to go ahead and chop or just smush it down.
Mm-hmm.
So make sure. Now this garlic I've been having a really hard time with my garlic lately. It must be a little older, but it's not smushing the way I like it to. So it kind of did a little bit there, but I'm just gonna go ahead and peel off this paper here.
Yeah, I've come across that too sometimes when I've had my garlic for a little bit longer. But I know when it's like fresh or you've just purchased it and you just hit that nice push on there with your blade. Oh my goodness, it cracks just right.
I know, it's so great. I love that sound.
Yeah.
There we go. All
There
right,
it
so that
is.
makes it a little bit better. But again, if you don't really like, using your blade to do this part, Sajua has a nice little tip. You can use another cutting board and actually just smush down on the garlic with a cutting board.
Mm-hmm.
So I am having a lot of trouble with this garlic today, guys.
Oh.
There we go. All right. So just slowly peeling off this paper. We really don't want that paper in our chili. This is something else you actually can add to your chili, your
Broth bag.
broth bag.
Not the chili. We are not adding scraps to our chili, you guys.
We're gonna go ahead and add it to our broth bag. Why
Yeah.
not? It's something extra.
Adds
So
flavor and such.
exactly. I just went ahead and chopped off the end pieces there. And then I'm just gonna make some planks out of this. So just cutting it through and running it through really quick. All right. And then I'm just gonna make a pile, and then this is how we mince. We put our fingers on top and then we just mince through. And just continuously, got a little paper there. Just continuously running our knife through it and making it smaller and smaller. If you do have pre-minced garlic on hand, you can definitely use that. But I always love the taste of fresh garlic. All right, finally got that ready to go. All right, so I'm just gonna set this off to the side. So we've got our onion and our garlic done. Moving on to the next step, it says to rinse our tomato and then remove the core and seeds, and then we're gonna chop it. So I had a few extra tomatoes from my garden. So I had a few extra aromas, so we're gonna use those today.
Ooh, they are bright, bright red.
We've had a really good year with tomatoes.
Yeah.
So you can, if you want, remove the seeds. It says to remove them. Usually I'll just take like a spoon or use my fingers, and you can just take those seeds out. You can make slices and then remove the seeds. So that might be a little easier to remove those seeds out of there. Honestly, we're making a chili, so I figure I might as well use it all.
Yeah.
So I'm just gonna go ahead and just roughly chop these really quick. I'm not gonna core these. I really like to use all of the tomato. Those seeds aren't gonna hurt you. They just add a little bit of extra moisture. But again, we're making a soup today, so it's all right. All right, and I'll just quickly chop these other ones. I always like to mention, if you haven't, you may notice that my knife is having a little trouble cutting through my tomatoes today. I haven't sharpened in a while, so it's a little more difficult. You may want to try a serrated knife, so the knife with the teeth on it just tends to work a little better for a tomato. Right. And one more to go. Sorry, these tomatoes are a little smaller. They are Roma tomatoes. But if you're working with something a little bigger, you won't have to do as many tomatoes.
No problem. It's almost relaxing watching you cut the tomatoes, and they're just so bright red. I'm really enjoying it. That's good. So are there any other vegetables for those of you who are out there watching us right now? Feel free to comment below. I'm just going to ask, are there any other vegetables that you guys would consider throwing into something like a chili? And if so, what are your favorite ones? How do you like to have your chilies? I know that I more commonly would do a red chili, kind of a tomato base. So whichever version you go with, let me know what kind of things you like to put into your chili.
Absolutely. You know, sometimes in my chilies, we have a different chili recipe that adds carrots in there. Kind of a fun one. All right. Yeah. So we've only got two things left to cut. We're going to add a little bit of lime juice to this. So we've got a large lime here. I'm just going to roll it a little bit. Please don't forget to rinse this lime. But if you roll it, it just kind of breaks the membranes up a little bit and allows you to get a little more juice out of this. You can also throw it in the microwave for about 10 seconds and it will do something similar. Really need to sharpen my knife, it looks like. All right, so we cut our onion in half, and in a small bowl, we're gonna squeeze the juice from one half, and then we're making sure that we're not using the seeds. So if you have like a juicer, you can definitely use that.
Oh, yeah. Or if you take a spoon sometimes and you like kind of push that in there, it can help.
Absolutely. So we're just gonna squeeze this out as best we can. I like to use my fingers and just kind of dig into the lime. Making sure, of course, that if we touch chicken or anything else, we wash them first.
Yes.
But all right.
And then the thing I like to note is even when you're done squeezing the juice out of something like a lime like that, you can still use that half that's been squeezed and throw that in a cup of water, and you'll still get some flavor added to your water or anything you might be drinking. And that's just another way that I like to try to make sure I'm getting the most out of the things that I'm purchasing, out of the most out of my grocery money, so that we're not just throwing it out.
Absolutely.
So, and we do have another half left over from today, so.
Yeah, you can save this. I usually just throw them in my fridge, and then this I will definitely, that's a good tip. I'll throw that in with my water. All right, last but certainly not least, we are going to be using some fresh basil today. Basil right now for me, I have a lot of it. It is in season, so go ahead and I know a lot of people right now say they have a lot of basil growing in their garden. But if you have it, great. If not, you can use dried basil. Right. The recipe also calls for a 1/4 cup of fresh cilantro leaves. So I said this before, if you don't like cilantro, don't use it. I unfortunately can't taste cilantro the way everybody else does, so I like to leave it out. But, so we're just gonna be doing our basil today. And we only need about a tablespoon of this fresh basil, so I'm just gonna go ahead and run my knife through it. I really love basil right now. So I'm just kind of mincing this through. I'm just making sure that we've got all those chunks in there. I just use the leaves of the basil, but you can use the stems, just making sure that you're cutting those a little bit finer.
Yeah, I've heard that too.
But it,
and Again, if you choose not to use your stems, because I've grown basil before too, indoors. So keep that in mind if you're any indoor planters. Like it's definitely something you could do is have an indoor herb garden. But keeping those stems and putting those in my broth bag, oh my word, talk about flavor, okay? That's gonna really ramp it up if you're not comfortable putting it in with a recipe like this.
Absolutely. All right, so let's just go ahead and take this out. We got that ready to go. And now I think we are finally ready to work with our chicken.
Okay, we're moving along here.
So I'm just gonna go ahead and make sure all of this is removed. So even though all of our vegetables, I just would like to always make sure that all of my vegetables are a ways away from my chicken.
Mm-hmm. In case there's any splash or anything. And even as Jordan mentioned, we are cooking everything together. So I know some of you are like, oh, well, what does it matter? But it's just a really good practice to keep no matter what, whenever you're introducing things like, chicken, fish, beef, pork, whatever kind of thing like that. You do not want that cross contamination because no matter how good your food is looking, you won't feel that good once it's done.
Absolutely. All right.
So,
So the next step actually says in a colander to rinse and drain our beans. So today we're working with 2 cans of Great Northern beans.
mhm.
You can use other beans in this recipe. I'm just trying this. I always like to try the recipe, how it's written. Of course, adjusting for the cilantro today. I like to try the recipe, how it's written the first time so I know how it's supposed to taste. But if you have other beans on hand, feel free to use those. So I already have those rinsed and drained. Unfortunately, these did not come in a low sodium option.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to go ahead and, I just went ahead and rinse those to get that salt off there. All right, so next we're gonna work with our chicken real quick. I've got 2 boneless, skinless chicken breasts here, and they're actually pretty trimmed, but I'm just gonna trim a little bit of the fat off of there. And it's really more expensive to buy these chicken breasts that are already trimmed for you. So if you ever see in the store, a lot of times there will be chicken that still has like the skin on it or a bone still in it. Usually that tends to be a little cheaper. So if you can learn how to break down your own chicken, and that tends to be a lot cheaper than buying this pre-cut stuff.
Yeah, I mean, one rule of thumb is the more work that's already been done for you, a little bit more expenses to be expected. So that goes for something like chicken, something like cheese too. So like block cheese versus shredded cheese. Make sure you're watching the unit prices on that. And there are sometimes sales, so take that into account too. This isn't a perfect rule of thumb. Of course, when there are sales, you want to consider that. So just keep that in mind when you're doing your shopping for recipes.
Absolutely. All right, so we got everything trimmed, and I just went ahead and cut them into strips, and then we're going to cut them into 1/2-inch cubes really quickly. So we can just throw that right back on top of our plate here and get that out of the way. Now we definitely don't want pieces that are too big. Keeping in mind, like, we are making a chili again today, so if you got a huge chunk of chicken like that, you probably wouldn't be the best. So I'm just going to cut those down to size a little bit.
Right. And also trying to keep those sizes around the same size is going to be really good for something like a chili, just because it's all cooking and you want to make sure that you're able to cook everything and not have to have some pieces that need to be cooked longer and that whole spiel. So keeping things about the same size really helps with cook time and making sure it's uniform all the way.
Absolutely. All right, a little bit longer today. Here we go. We'll just go ahead and quickly cut these down.
So while Jordan's talking about, Jordan's not talking, while Jordan's working through her chicken, I just want to take a moment to talk about some ways that we are going to be spicing today's chili. I don't know if you guys can see her spices so beautifully laid out right there. She's got a beautiful array of herbs and spices today, lots of colors there. So I do want to ask you guys out there, what kind of spices do you like to put into your chilies? And how does that compare to like the spices we're using today? I know that for me, I like to use spices because they add a lot of flavor to meals. And that way I still get flavor, but I don't have to add the sodium. And I can limit the amount of sodium that I'm adding. So making the choice to use fresh and dried spices really amps up that flavor without amping up the salt. So keep that in mind. And I know that when it does come to herbs and spices, buying fresh sometimes isn't the most reasonable thing. Like Jordan mentioned today, basil, she had some in her garden already, but maybe you don't use a lot of basil and maybe you don't have any in your garden. So, buying it for this one recipe might not be the most cost effective thing for you. Well, in that case, I would want you to consider dried because it could be stored better. And oftentimes you can buy smaller quantities, which could be held longer, like I mentioned earlier. So keep that in mind when you're buying your herbs and spices. You know what I mean? We really want to make sure that we're promoting the herbs and spices and limiting our sodium, which does, too much sodium, your high blood pressure becomes an issue. It's related to heart diseases and stroke. So it can get kind of dangerous when you're eating a lot of sodium in your diet. And any way you can cut back is going to be a good thing to do.
Absolutely.
And we'll talk a little bit more about dried herbs and spices and storage a little bit later.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, Sajwa.
Yeah.
So now we're just going to kind of throw everything together once we've got everything prepped. So I'm going to go ahead and throw some oil in the bottom of my pan here. And then I have it over a medium heat right now. I'm going to add my onion and my garlic. And we're just going to quickly cook this through. I did. Where is my garlic? I added my garlic to my bagel, but that's okay. Just going to pick that out a little bit. All right. So we're going to cook until the onion's tender and then the garlic starts to brown a little bit. So this is going to sit for a little while. I always figure with a chili or a soup, the longer you cook it, it seems like the better it tastes.
Yeah, right? And I feel like it also always tastes better the next day. Something about that overnight where the, flavors are able to mix together and get to know one another for a couple of hours. The next day, I'm telling you, it's like you have a whole different meal.
Absolutely. So we just quickly are gonna cook these together. And what's our next step here? We're gonna add our chicken, beans, broth, spices, tomatoes, lime juice, basil, and cilantro. So basically, you cook everything together. And then we're gonna we're gonna reduce the heat, cover it, and let it simmer for an hour. You're gonna wanna stir that occasionally just so things don't, stick and you can help it along a little bit. But so now we're just going to go ahead and throw everything in. So let's go ahead and add our chicken. Got a lot of chicken here, but that's all right. We've got some awesome protein in today's recipe.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, Jordan. Yep, today we've got protein coming from our meat, our chicken today. And then we've also got protein coming from one of our plant-based sources, so the beans. So those together is going to make this a really high protein meal. We've also got vegetables coming in from, we've got our onion, our garlic, our tomato, those kind of things. So this is going to be a really good one for that. Let me think, what else are we missing on my plate? I guess grains. Do we have a grain in there? I don't believe so.
No, not today.
Okay. But the case with this is, with foods like this, you can always add something like if you wanted to, a little small dinner roll, just one portion size of a grain. Remember, you guys, to try to keep half of your grains whole grains. So just keep that in mind. It seems like we're also missing the fruit. If you're counting tomatoes, fruits or not, you know what I mean? So that's kind of a tricky one. But if you are counting tomato as a fruit, we have it. If you're not, you could always have a fruit for a snack or a dessert on the side with this guy. But otherwise, this is a really good recipe. The only other thing I can think of would be the dairy. Again, maybe some fruit and yogurt afterwards. If this is a dinner meal, you could have that for dessert. And by doing that, fruit, yogurt, and maybe a little granola, there you go. Like there's all the components of my plate there for you.
Absolutely. All right. So I've got most everything added. I've got my basil, my tomatoes, my beans, and then we also added 4 cups of chicken broth. My dog is running around a lot today. Sorry, guys. So I am just, we need 4 cups of this chicken broth. I just wanted to mention this is a low sodium option. So that is always great to look for. If you're not making your own, you can always buy a little bit healthier choice.
Yeah.
And last but certainly not least, we are adding our seasonings. And I just wanted to quickly run through what we have in here. We've got our chili powder, cumin, salt, pepper, and then oregano.
Yeah.
If you want to spice it up a little bit, you can add some cayenne, or the recipe does actually say to add some red pepper flakes at the end if you like that spice.
And the great thing about this, as Jordan mentioned, as we've been going through actually, but with the beans, we, rinse the beans to get rid of that extra sodium. We're using a reduced sodium broth, and then we added our own salt at the end. So that way we had control over how much would be going into our recipe. Sometimes we forget that there's salt in a lot of the other things that we're already cooking with, and then we add more salt on top of that, and it's a slippery slope to a high sodium situation. So just keep that in mind when you're cooking. And the other thing I want you guys to consider is when you are using herbs and spices, consider mixing up the flavor profile of your dish. So you can definitely add different combinations of herbs and spices, and that will add a lot of variety. So just like before we go to the next thing, let me just cover the 5 primary flavors. We've got sweet, we've got sour, bitter, salty, and savory. So those are the 5 primary flavors. With this guy, I think we're getting a little bit of that salty, savory. I haven't tasted this one yet, so Jordan will have to know if we're covering some of the other ones, but keep that in mind when you are seasoning your foods. And a lot of chefs will combine different spices and ingredients, and that's how you get different flavor profiles. So this one, for some reason, I'm feeling a little kind of like Italian, and for some reason, I'm getting that with like the basil and the oregano that we added.
Yeah.
But then that cumin adds a nice little punch. So consider different ways that you could mix it up when it comes to your foods, this recipe or others.
Yes, so we've got a lot going on here, but I think it's going to turn out great.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to bring this mixture to a boil. We're going to reduce the heat, and then we're going to let it simmer for an hour. So this is a great kind of throw together meal, and then you just let it sit. So I'm just going to quickly show you guys what it looks like all coming together.
Ooh, look at those colors, you guys. I'm seeing some reds, some whites, some greens. That's really pretty. And the broth is even like an orange. We always say eating a rainbow, when you're seeing more colors in your food, you're getting more nutrients, and that means you're having more of a variety in what you're putting in there. So all of that works together to create a healthy, fulfilling meal.
Yes. All right, guys. So that is our white bean basil chicken chili. When this is complete, you can go ahead and actually serve it on top of like a spinach or a kale to add a little bit more vegetables, or you can actually serve it over a brown rice and get that grain that we're missing as well.
Yeah,
so,
that's a wonderful tip. Well, thank you, Jordan, so much for demonstrating that recipe for us. I know this is a new one for you. It's a new one for me too. So please let me know how that one turns out. And then I'll have to give it a try myself on my own time. I do want to also thank all of you for joining us for this week's episode of Cooking Connected, the white bean chili. And I'm going to pull up that survey code again, you guys. Please, if you have some time after this video, please take our survey for us and help us continue this kind of work. The survey code is E097392. So we really appreciate you guys for joining us, and go ahead and check out our Facebook page and take our poll for this week so we can figure out what we're going to do next week. We've been really loving the feedback we've been getting from everyone, and that's been spurring these new recipes that we've been trying. So keep it up, you guys, and we'll see you next week for Cooking Connected. Bye.
Bye, everyone.